He has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
Have you ever been involved in that conversation where you feel like something stinks and you're just not sure what it is? You know, it's frustrating, it's aggravating, it's irritating. You're just not sure why. But then you realize later that at the end of the conversation, the other person kind of won every part of the argument, and you really didn't even set out to argue. It was just like, I thought we were having a casual conversation, but I still feel like I walked away and I've had my emotions in a noogie with somebody just rubbing on the top of my head. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I can tell you there's a whole lot of people that I've had conversations with that probably walked away when I was done feeling like I had them in a verbal noogie the whole time. Like I was just beating them over the head, taking advantage, beating them down with thoughts and ideas that they didn't come here to share. They didn't come to hear them. They didn't want to be any part of that. Yeah, but here they are, trapped in the reality that is my own desire to puff myself up and tell them how awesome I am. Now, I pray that as I get more mature, that I do that a whole lot less, that I spend a whole lot more time listening so that when I have something to say, it's intelligent and it's valuable and it adds value to them. But I can tell you a real truth. You know that old kindergarten phrase, it takes one to know one? Well, I was one. And so I know one when I see one. And I recognize very quickly now when I'm in a conversation with someone whose narcissistic views of the world, everything is focused on them. It's all about them. In fact, it's only about them. It's about their accomplishments and their successes and their wins. And if your losses just happen to come up alongside their wins, they're going to bring it up. I promise you they're going to bring it up. They're going to tell you all about how wonderful they are and how terrible you are. It's not just the one-upsmanship. They're going to attack your character. They're going to attack your accomplishments. They're going to attack your education. Oh, you went to that school. Yeah, that's why you don't understand. I mean, I understand that you got the MBA or the PhD, and that's wonderful, but you know, you can get those in a Cracker Jack box too. You got that kind of education in that kind of place. Woohoo for you. But you obviously don't have what I have. You're not as smart as I am. You're not as educated as I am. You're not as connected as I am. You mentioned so-and-so friend, but I'm going to name drop these other 5 friends that are even more important than your friend so that everybody around us that's overhearing our conversation realizes just how special I am. Now, if you've ever been in the conversation with that person like that, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, you've probably felt the same way, like you've been in a verbal, emotional, relational noogie. Like somebody just had you in a headlock and they're just scrubbing on your head the whole time. And emotionally, you don't want to do that again. You don't want to be around them again. You don't want the world to be looked at through that lens. If you're the kind of leader who feels like you've got to have the first word in every conversation and also the last word in every conversation, you need to take a look at yourself. You might check your deodorant because you might be the armpit of the conversation. You might be the reason that people are kind of stepping away, taking a deep breath and holding their breath because you stink at conversation. If you don't spend at least as much time listening as you do talking, chances are you're talking too much. Trust me, I know, I've been there, I've done that, I get it. And there are a whole lot of times that I get involved in a conversation with people that I know are way smarter than I am. And sometimes I get in those conversations and before I catch myself, revert back into that place where I'm like, hey, but see, I've got this idea. And what could you validate my idea? Because you're smarter than me, you have better credentials than me, everybody knows, but I want to share my idea with you so that you can look at my idea and go, that was brilliant. Where did you come up with that idea? I need that validation because I'm still immature and I still hurt in some areas and I need somebody to pat me on the back because my arm doesn't reach as well. And if you're a leader and you find yourself doing that, in the words of Bob Newhart, stop that. Just stop it. Just stop it. Because you're not accomplishing anything. You're not making friends. You're not building notoriety. You're not winning anything. Now, if you've been watching media for, 15 minutes, you'll notice there are a lot of journalists out there, even people involved in media who wouldn't be called by the profession journalists. They may or may not call themselves journalists. But the reality is they're in front of a camera, they're interviewing somebody, and they're spending the entire time playing the verbal gotcha. They're asking questions that really have no win to the answer. There is no way to answer it wisely, safely, without being castigated and persecuted either now or in the near future. Those questions that there is no right answer to. Have you stopped beating your wife yet? Well, there's no right answer to that. You can't answer that question. To simply say never did is presumptive, just like the presumption that have you yet is presumptive. But sometimes just the framing of the question traps you in a place that by answering it, you're going to get caught. And sometimes in job interviews, a leader will manipulate a candidate. It's been known by the FBI and other law enforcement. There's actually an interrogation technique. There's a name for it. You can look it up. An interrogation technique that allows an officer to tell a little bit of a straight up lie. We have your compadre in the other room, and they have already told us what you did with the gun. And when your answer is, what gun? They were killed with a baseball bat. Aha! Aha! Yeah, the other person in the other room hadn't said anything, but can I have some sugar for my coffee? And you've just been straight up lied to. But now you've mentioned a bat, which is ironic because that matches the evidence at the scene and the injuries. See where I'm going with this? The leader who feels like a job interview, a media interview, a social media interview, like on a podcast, for an example, is the place to use these tools of verbal sparring techniques that they got to get the jab in the minute you take a breath. If you just pause, they're going to throw something at you that's intended to take you off balance. It's going to cause you to answer a question that really doesn't deserve to be answered. But because they caught you off guard, it's like a pattern interrupt. They ask something that seems so far out in left field, it's irrelevant. And it might be irrelevant. I know there have been people who've been prosecuted for lying to law enforcement over questions as innate as, so what time did you stop for coffee that morning? Oh, I don't know. I think it was probably 7:15. That's usually about the time I get to the coffee shop. And then 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 months, 2 or 3 weeks later, somebody asks the question, so I understand you were in the coffee shop that day. Yes. Do you know what time you were there? I don't remember. I did look up the receipt, though. I think the receipt said I was there at 7:45. Yeah, we found the receipt as well. It says 7:45. But you told other law enforcement people that it was 7:15. So I need you now to account for the other 30 minutes of time. Were you standing in line all that time? Or were you somewhere else? Because that's about the time that the crime happened. And now you've made yourself a witness or an accomplice or the suspect. But really, you can be prosecuted just because you said 2 different times. One of them off the top of your head and the other one based on the receipt. See, that's the verbal gotcha game. That's the leader who feels like I've got to be in charge of everything. I will control you to get you to lie on yourself, to get you to tell a story on yourself, to get you to make up things that, well, they're not true. And if they were true, you probably shouldn't have said them out loud. And it's not an uncommon thing for law enforcement to kind of get you in that gotcha. It's not an uncommon thing for a leader who's doing job interviews, who's, for whatever reason, already decided they don't like this candidate to play the same kind of gotcha game. Especially if maybe the candidate has been recommended by somebody that they despise. Or they really need a win to get their candidate in this spot because that's going to give them more leverage in the near future. See, if they're playing the gotcha game in the interview, there's a reason for that. They do. But you can add to that the possibility that maybe they're just a nihilist. They don't really have any association that culture, society, traditions, mores, relationships have any value at all. There really is no meaning to life. They're ready to move on with the sands of time, and they don't really care about you or any other human or the earth or the globe or global warming or anything like that. They really just don't care. They're barely a cog in the wheel. They barely have a piece to play in all of this. And so, who really cares? At this point, what does it really matter anyway? They also have nothing to lose if they become the interrogator, the abuser, the person who calls out everything from your race to your color. They want to make fun of everything there is about you, your personhood, your relationships, your education, your race, your belief system, your faith. They will call all of it to task because they got no dog in this hunt at all. They couldn't care less how you feel when this is all over. They're perfectly okay if you walk out and feel like you've been in an emotional noogie. They don't care. They're going to beat you over the head. They're going to browbeat you. They're going to humiliate you. They're going to embarrass you because that's how they win. Their ego is so fragile. Their self-confidence so bruised. The nature of who they are is already under attack by that yo-yo in the mirror. And because all that's true, you become the punching bag for them to practice on, to reinforce their superiority, to secure their personhood. They may not even believe in it, but they want to make sure that you do. They want to be certain that you do, that you give in, that you surrender all, that you walk away cowered down and realizing you lost. I heard an interesting aspect of a relationship today when I heard a guy say, one of our challenges is we tend to give ground to the enemy. And then he went on to describe the enemy. And I thought to myself, that's not really an enemy. I mean, you've identified who you call your enemy, but they're really not enemies. They may be opponents. But whether you're talking about a tennis match or a football game of whichever type of ball you use, the pointy one or the round one, or a hockey game or a basketball game, that group of people or that individual on the other side of the net, of the court, of the field, that's not your enemy. That might be your opponent. In the moment, those are the ones for whom you've got to play at your best game. You've got to give it all you've got. You've got to be at the top of your game. But when it's over, you can still go have a drink together. You can sit down around dinner together. There's no desire, or there shouldn't be, for you to mortally wound them. There should be no desire. This is not a jousting match in the days of old where the winner gets the girl and the other one gets the grave. It's not like that anymore, most of the time. It shouldn't be that way in civil discourse. It shouldn't be that way on a podcast. It shouldn't be that way in a television interview, whether it's the paparazzi on the street trying to catch the great celebrity in their weakest moment of how they're dressed or what they've been up to or who they've been with. It shouldn't be that kind of gotcha game where you see the person on the other side of the conversation as an enemy, as an opponent, perhaps. Maybe ideas, maybe generations. I get it. That's fair. That's understandable. But at the end of the day, you should be able to have your intellectual, intelligent, worthwhile, well thought out, well prepared conversation and still walk away respecting their humanity. when you feel like they are an enemy who deserves mortal destruction, an enemy that should be not just won over in the argument, but won over in life. They need to be demoralized, dehumanized, destroyed. You've got to destroy them. How many social media memes have you seen where it says, so-and-so destroys such and such? And I think back to that old video game, Mortal Kombat. Choose your weapon. And really what they're talking about is picking the character with their talents and their skills and their abilities and what are they capable of. Well, that's how you've chosen your weapon, right? Now the question is, how far will you go in this Mortal Kombat, this emotional game, this verbal sparring? Are you here to win the argument, win the day, win the person over to your side, to your way of thinking? Or are you here to utterly destroy and demoralize and dehumanize them? Are you here to see to it that they never speak in public again? They're so shamed that you've silenced them. By the way, if you're the kind of leader that feels like your ideas only excel when no one else talks, there's not just something wrong with you as a leader, Mr. or Mrs. Armpit. There's something wrong with your ideas. If your ideas, if your philosophies, if your worldview is so weak, fragile, and frail that the only way for it to win in the ideas and the minds of others is that everyone else be silenced, crushed, destroyed, there's something wrong with your ideas. They're broken. They don't work. Give them up and find new ones. I can't tell you how frustrated I get listening to people who feel like they've got to beat somebody over the head with an idea. You've got to get this. You've got to give up your way. I get just as frustrated, though, with people who don't mow their lawn on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock when the sun is beating down and the outside temperature is 102 and it hasn't been watered in 3 weeks. That's a really bad time to fertilize. And you, right, you're arguing the wrong points. You're arguing points that are irrelevant and unchangeable. What we're really talking about is it the right time to fertilize your lawn or not? Seems like an innocuous conversation. But people who strategize, demoralizing and dehumanizing, that's exactly what they look for. They look to pick holes in, to poke holes through your ideas in their infancy. They don't want to wait until the idea is fully developed and ask the general question or ask the overarching question about your worldview. No, they don't want you to get there. They don't want you to get there. Heaven forbid your idea be well supported by facts and documentation and experiences. No, they'd much rather poke holes in one anecdote or one experience. Maybe even to say, well, that's been fact-checked and that one thing is wrong. Okay, I get it. I don't have Bermuda grass. I have St. Augustine. I cede the fact that my grass is different than your grass. Oh, well, then the whole argument goes out the window. No, it doesn't. It's 4 o'clock when it's 102 degrees outside and the grass is dry and crunchy. Is that the right time to fertilize or should I wait till the dark? That's my question. Well, but you got the wrong kind of grass in the first place. What kind of idiot puts down St. Augustine grass when you should have Bermuda like everybody else? See, that's how those arguments tend to go. And if you're the kind of leader, the kind of podcast host, journalist, television host, who feels like every conversation has to be a verbal sparring match that breaks the will of the person on the other side, that points out the flaws and the irrelevant parts of the conversation, you're an armpit of leadership. Stop it. Take the time to get to know the people you're talking about, even just a little bit. Ask the real questions, the genuine questions. Get to know their character. What do they care about? What's important to them? Who are they? You don't have to ask the questions that leave them feeling trapped and abused. There are plenty of questions to ask. There are plenty of things to talk about that allow both sides to be heard, that allow you to learn to appreciate and add value to them. If you're a leader, you're an influencer. Influence them for good. Don't prove yourself to be smarter, more intellectual, agile. If you make them combatant, you're going to be combated against and combated with. I don't think that's really the way you want to lead. That's not the kind of influence you want to have. I know there are some journalists who have made a life of it. There are some journalists, though, and interview guests as well, quick on the right through your flimsy little question and the attack that you intend to lay with it. They recognize the trap of the snare with the stick under the box and the string waiting to pull. They've been there. They've done that. They've been trapped that way. I'm not falling for the banana and the tailpipe trick again. Yeah, it's not going to happen. But if you're the kind of leader that feels like that's the only way you win a conversation, the only way you get your ideas across, something wrong with you. Take some time to look in the mirror. Check your deodorant. Are you the smelly armpit of the conversation that nobody wants to get engaged in? Are they avoiding you for a reason? If the answer to those questions is yes, maybe you need a coach. Maybe you need somebody who can help you with your strategic communications. JLorenNorris.com. I'll be glad to help. Be glad to sit down and chat with you and listen to the way you have these job interviews and these face-to-face encounters and these conversations over coffee. Maybe you're just not aware that that behavior is in you. Like I said, takes one to know one. I was one for a long time, and I know one when I see one. And if you let me, I'll love you enough to tell you the truth. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.